Good afternoon. Here we are again. Welcome to session 4 of VisugXL. I hope everyone is enjoying this virtual conference so far. Don't forget to rate the sessions you are attending, and we love your feedback about all sessions and this virtual experience. Now time for our next speaker, Emily Luijbregts. Emily has a very appropriate session in these crazy times, and she will explain us how to work with virtual teams. Enjoy.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the introduction. A little bit of an introduction about myself. As you can hear, although I have a very Dutch sounding last name, I'm actually British. I live in the Netherlands, so please don't hold that against me, firstly, for being British. I do apologise for Brexit. And I wanted to really share knowledge with you today. So I am a project manager and Scrum Master. I'm also a mentor and a coach, and I have over 10 years experience working in project management. I am an ambassador for projectmanagement.com as well as a digital project manager, and I love to be able to share knowledge with the community. That's my aim and that is my goal. So I can be found on Twitter. I have a blog at mthepm, and also I would really appreciate if you have any feedback or you'd have any questions after this session, please feel free to email me at emily@mthepm.com. In my spare time, I love to go running and I love trail running, and it is one of my passions to be able to de-stress and also to be able to relax and see more of the country. So let's have a look at what we're going to be covering today. We are going to be looking at the basics of understanding working virtually, because I want to make sure that we all start with a very clear foundation for what I mean. I'm then going to be giving you a few tips for working virtually. Now, I'm going to guess that in the past couple of months, you probably have had maybe an extreme change in how you are working. Maybe you were working in an office and now you're predominantly working at home, or maybe this is a completely normal thing for you. I'm going to be also giving you advice how you can manage your teams virtually, but I'm also going to be giving you advice if you just want to be able to learn how to work with your teams more effectively, and not just from a manager to employee, but also colleague to colleague, because the tips that you will be getting today can be applied and can be used anywhere. Now, I'm not just going to be telling you what you should do, I'm also going to be telling you what you shouldn't do, and maybe a few things that you might want to avoid if you are working virtually, and some of the problems and the pitfalls that you can have. So let's get started and look at the basics of working virtually. So before we get into how we want to work, the tools, the management, let's first understand working virtually. Now, it does require a different skill set. It is different to being in a physical location and working face-to-face. Soft skills become a lot more important. And, if you look at the cultures that you're working with and how you manage them, you can really see a difference between how you work maybe with your colleagues and with your teams in the Benelux and potentially other cultures. And this will impact how you can actually work and lead teams. So you need to make sure that you are keeping an eye on the composition of your teams. How are they made up? Who is actually in your teams? So I also recommend that all leaders be able to understand themselves. How they like to work is also being a paramount activity to be able to then identify if there are issues, how they can move forward. For example, if you don't enjoy working from home, and you can look inside yourself or look at how you are working, and you can maybe identify why you don't like working at home, then you already have that awareness to be able to see if you can resolve it to make it more palatable, especially when, during the times that we have at the moment where you maybe are forced to work home more than you'd like. So when you have that self-awareness, it can really help you to be able to understand and identify how you can get the most satisfaction for yourself for working remotely, but also how you can also support your teams and colleagues if they are also struggling. And having that self-awareness is not just a reflection on how you like to work, but also it can be a reflection and an analysis of what makes you a good or slightly bad leader. If you already know some of that, then you can work on that to be able to change and to be able to adapt. Now, I would like to be able to understand, but I'm not going to, within the Q&A and the chat, we can always do this later. But ask yourself this question. Do you really enjoy working from home? Do you enjoy working predominantly virtually? Now, I'm going to guess a lot of you are probably going to say, yes, I really do. I love the flexibility. But there's also going to be some of you that are going to go, well, it's all right, but I don't like it because I miss the interaction with my colleagues, or I miss the fact that I can go to an actual physical location away from my home. I miss being able to, get in my car and listen to music. Being able to understand whether or not you do or don't can be a really, really important analysis for also understanding, when you're not in lockdown, like we are going to potentially be going into in more a stricter measure, how you can also make the best of both worlds, how you can make your working environment work for you, and then also be able to then support your teams and understand how you can support them. So another one I'd like to kind of ask and get your feedback on is soft skills. So how many of you have looked at or had training to improve your soft skills in the last 6 months? Now, the reason I say the last 6 months is because when COVID hit, a lot of companies were forced into a dramatic digital transformation. So a lot of companies that were maybe working very, very old-fashioned were forced to change and adapt. Now, some companies adopted this by saying, okay, what we're going to do is we're just going to make sure that we do everything that we have to do as quickly and as minimalistic as possible. Other companies chose this as an opportunity to be able to see, okay, we have the opportunity to be able to invest in our teams here and invest in kind of what's going on. So why don't we do that? Why don't we invest in making sure that people have the skills that they need to be able to work virtually? Now, when I've been discussing this in various groups, and I've been discussing this with my peers, the amount of organizations that had not done this was directly correlating with the organizations that were now dramatically struggling with how they lead projects, how they can fully integrate and support their teams, but also coming 6 months later that we are now at September, October time, they are really struggling with the foundations of team motivation. Employees are leaving, and it's also causing quite a lot of mental health issues and stress for the people that are now struggling with either, how to do time management, how to do effective, resourcing and stress management. All of those things are stemming from this one thing of soft skills. Now, one thing that I really, really enjoy, and I try and make sure that I'm very, very clear on, is expectation management. So again, ask yourself, and when you are looking at your projects or what you're working on at the moment, have a look and kind of see, are you making sure that everyone is aligned? Or is there alignment in your teams about working times, about what tools you're using and when, and how are you using these tools? But also, what is being delivered? So, when we're looking at, for example, working times, a lot of the teams that I'm working with at the moment, they are really adjusting their days. So if they have people in the team that have young children, they are adjusting it either to allow for the school drop-offs, or they are adjusting that for allowing for childcare. Also, when there has been different working times, if the teams are working in different locations. So I have teams based in India, which means normally my European team likes to start a little bit earlier, but then we'll finish earlier. And then additionally, I've also got teams in the eastern coast of the US. They are also starting later, but then they finish later. So this flexibility that we can give around working times is really, really good. But we had to come to an agreement first. Everyone had to be aligned on expectation management, what was going to be acceptable, what we needed to know, and what was okay to be done. Now, when we're talking about tools, this is going to be the tools that we're using on a daily basis in our projects. I'm not talking about the random tools from HR or something like that you only use once in the blue moon. I'm talking about the tools, Teams, Discord, Slack, how you use them, when is appropriate, and also making sure that you can be very clear on what is being delivered in your projects and in your teams, and when and how, because that is one of the most important aspects of making sure that there are no surprises. So when we're looking at the tips for working virtually, let's get straight into my favorite one, ground rules. Now, I'm a project manager. I have actually been told I am a complete control freak. My husband likes to say it in a not so nice way, but I go with it. But what I love to do, and this is something that I have done in my teams now for the last 5 years, is I do a team manifesto when we start. So I like to be able to set clear ground rules at the very, very start of an engagement for how we like to work, how our teams are going to be running, and making sure that we have a very, very clear understanding of how we like to work, what is appropriate, what is not appropriate, and we can make sure that moving forward, everyone is aligned on, the basics. We celebrate success as a team. We fail together. We are not afraid to fail. Giving a team name, having some sort of fun to begin with. Now, when we do this virtually, because I have gone into 5 or 6 new projects since the start of lockdown, we have done this virtually. So we have used a concept board, or we've used an online whiteboard, and we've been doing this with online sticky notes, and we still are able to have this exercise done. We just move it virtually. So we use the tools available to us to be able to then make sure that we have this. And then I work through and I make it a little bit pretty. I put it into the order that we want, and then everyone has it. I send it around to everyone. I ask them, put it on a board or put it somewhere that you are going to see it every day, because that also helps build how we want to work together as a team. Now, one of the big things I try to encourage is avoid making assumptions. Avoid making assumptions for how people like to work. So you're a developer, so you must be like this. Or you're a project manager, that means that you are like that. You don't know. You have to ask. You have to do your research. You have to look at the best way of being able to work, and what is the best way of being able to come to have a good working relationship. Moving on to that, it's all around how you like to work. So I have a group of project managers that I work with. So some of us like to have hour-long meetings. Some of us like to have 30-minute meetings. Some of us like to have 25 or 45-minute meetings. I like to be able to work that with my team. I ask them, what's best for them? How do they like to work? Now, previously, when we were in physical locations, we used to do either 45 or 55-minute meetings to be able to give everyone to have that 5 or 10-minute break to be able to move to another location in the office or in another building, or to be able just to have a break, go and get a coffee, go to the bathroom. Now, also, one of the foundations that we have is purely around how we like to work. When do we have emails? When do we have meetings? When do we just pick up the phone and talk? That's really, really important. And one of the things that I'm also putting in the team manifesto, but in how we like to work, so that, for everyone, we can fully understand what is the best way for us to be able to collaborate. Now, I am very, very passionate on ensuring a good work-life balance. In my career as a project manager, I have now seen more people than I like to actually think that have had to be signed off with stress or signed off because they've had a burnout. I have coached people back from the abyss of a burnout where they have physically not been able to work for 6 months. So to me, considering and ensuring a work-life balance within my teams is critically important to me. So when I'm working with my developers and I'm working with my solution architects and my implementation consultants, I make sure that they realize that I do not expect them online at 7 a.m. in the morning and work until 11 p.m. at night. In fact, if I see that, or I see that they are working stupid hours, I will raise it with them. I will say, is it necessary? Oh, you know what? I saw that you worked stupidly hard for a couple of weeks. Can you please take a day off? Make sure that they have that sort of a break that they can be able to work with. Now, of course, that's sometimes not always going to be possible, but you can put that in place and put that check in place for your team so that then you can consider that balance. And you can consider, if you are starting early to work with India, then finish early. Finish at, 3, 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Go for a run. Go and enjoy the daylight. especially when in Europe at the moment, we're going to be going into a very, very dark winter, because winter is coming, that it's good to be able to take that little bit of time, either it's over lunch or, when it's still daylight, to be able to get the, get the full, the full use of the vitamin D and the sunlight that we may be having. Although unfortunately in the Netherlands, it's just mainly grey and cloudy. Now, one of the other tips that I have for working virtually is also around meetings and workshops. So I'm going to give you a challenge, and I want you to see if you can do it. I want you to analyze how you can avoid Zoom fatigue. So Zoom fatigue is where you get that head pressure and that you've just been sitting in way too many meetings. And it's known that virtual workshops and meetings really do take a lot out of you. Because normally when you could do, for example, a 3-4 hour physical workshop, now after an hour, 30 minutes, 2 hours, your head just needs a break. You just need to take more of a break when you're working virtually. So let's have a look at the different types of meetings that you have, and is there any way to be able to make them more productive? So I've put a few ideas here for you. Firstly, are your meetings productive in the first place? Do you even need the meeting? So I would like to and I have this challenge with a lot of my teams, a lot of people I coach, cut 50% of your meetings. That's it. Just try and eliminate as many meetings as you physically can. And with the rest, make sure that they are as effective and as useful as possible. That means make sure that the purpose is very clear, that there is a very clear agenda, that the right people are actually sitting in the meeting, and that you can make sure that you have a maximum duration. Now, this is also taking into consideration regular breaks, etc. So when we're doing workshops or we're hosting trainings, I like to be able to try and do either 45-minute blocks or hour 30 maximum before taking a scheduled 10-15-minute break. Now, that might sound extreme. And you might say, are you addicted to coffee? Well, maybe slightly. But I found that people's concentration, if I give them that amount of break and that amount of time that we commit, is actually a lot more. And we get a lot more out of each other and out of the training than if we try and do a 3-hour session from 9 till 12 or from 1 till 4. And I find that, the actual information that goes in and the collaboration that we can have is so much better if we have more breaks. Now, another thing is to look at the best time to schedule meetings. And this is also taken into consider meeting-free days. So I like to try and have no meetings on a Friday. I call that my admin day. I call that my day for just trying to get work done. But I also try and look at the best time to schedule meetings, not just for the developers and the teams that I work with, but also for clients. So this isn't just about time zone. This isn't just about, the working day. This is around when are you most productive and using that to your advantage when you're scheduling meetings. If you are a morning person, great. Have a look at scheduling meetings in the morning. But then, if you may be an afternoon person or an, mid to late afternoon and you kind of like working a little bit later, see if you can do that. See if you can work with your teams to be able to facilitate that. So the key objective that we're looking at here is avoiding Zoom fatigue. Now, I want you to have a look at your calendar after this meeting. And I want you to have a look at it. And I want you to actually see how much could be eliminated. And if you are one of the attendees of a meeting and you're seeing that your value is not there, or you could really be using your time elsewhere, let the attendee, let the meeting organizer know. Or maybe ask, well, do I really need to be attending this? Is there any way that I could just get the minutes? I know that for some meetings you need to be there, you need to be adding in, you need to be listening and adding value. But perhaps sometimes, you don't need that. So have a look and be critical with not only your use of your time, but where you're putting your team's time, because that is going to be critical. So let's have a look at managing the teams virtually. So this is going to be the real crux of how you manage your teams. What are some great ideas and things that you might want to be aware of? So let's go and have a look at how we manage our teams virtually. So I want to give you some tips for learning how to get the most out of your teams. So one of the things that, at the moment, it's not as easy to be able to do is face-to-face introductions and team building. I like to do this at the start so that I can get to know people. I want to know and I want to understand what makes that person tick, but also how they are as an individual. Because, unfortunately, when you are working virtually, you don't really get that body language. You don't necessarily get that, that 90% of nonverbal communication that you can get when you're kind of just talking to someone, over a coffee, or if you're trying to, get to really know someone in a team building exercise. So I try and do as much as I can face-to-face introductions, just so that we can work on our relationship, as well as if that's feasible, doing some team building. Now, when you are working with teams, for example, in China or in the US, this physically might not be possible. The budget might not be there, or it might just, not be possible at the current state of, the project or what you're doing. That's also fine. But just be aware of what you can actually do to be able to then build that relationship. So now, I know that I'm talking at a technological, at a technology conference. So I am not going to start giving you how to use a team guide. I'm not going to try and give you some of the basics information here. But I do want you, and I want to encourage you to get to know all of the tools that can help you. So I've got a few here that have really helped me in being able to kind of build and maintain a good working relationship. So within Microsoft Teams, we have the chat, and I have my own tabs, for example, for actions, team information, and I put like a project wiki or a team wiki on each group, so that then I can note down information like I don't work Wednesdays, Deborah doesn't work Fridays, Jean doesn't like to work Thursday afternoons, or doesn't like meetings on Thursday afternoon, should I say. But you also have to look internally at your own company, because not only can you see what other people in your organization are doing, but you can see what's allowed and what's physically possible. So within the security policies of different companies, they may not allow some of these tools. So I know, for example, at some of the financial institutions, Slack and Trello are not allowed. Microsoft Teams is allowed, but only within internal teams and not inviting external guests. There are also tools like Concept Board, which is a way of being able to visually map out specific processes, or being able just to kind of do retrospectives. And that can be really, really useful, but only if you can get access to it. So I want you to have a look, and I want you to make an action for yourself to not only look at what tools are able to help you, but also ask your teams. Ask your colleagues, what tools are you using? What's a great tool for collaborating? What do you do? Share that knowledge internally. Share that knowledge with your colleagues, because it could be that, someone has a great tool and they just want to share it, or maybe you've not heard of it. And it might be a really, really good way to be able to think about how you can also make a meaningful connection with your team. So when we're working in our meetings, we like to have our videos on. It's not just so that you can see the background, or, we have holiday pictures or something else. It's so that you can make sure that, not only is that person there, that you know what they look like, what their body language is like. We have had, the unfortunate of, when you have a virtual meeting and you have that really weird sound of water trickling, and you're not sure if they've used the bathroom or if they're just grabbing a coffee. We've got that as well. But if you have video, it makes it a little bit easier to make sure that you can actually see everyone that's in the call. So one of the things that I try and do with my team is I try on working and building a meaningful connection with each of them. What brings them together? What turns them off? So when I was working with a group of developers a few years ago now, we had a team building session at the start of the project, and we had groups that were based in Belgium, in the Netherlands, and also in India. Now, the biggest problem that we actually had was how we can all use one language. So although everyone was speaking English, not everyone was speaking the same English. So we're not just kind of talking about the words we were using. It was our understanding of the fundamentals of how we like to work together as a team, but also things like honesty. What was 100% honesty to someone in Belgium was not the 100% honesty that we were having with our teams in India or China. So it was really, really important for me to be able to understand what were the foundation blocks of how they like to work as an individual, but also what brings them together. What music, what sport. With my US teams, they are currently going crazy about the NFL. And unfortunately, there was a game that was going on that was very, very good about the Pittsburgh Steelers or something. And it was great to be able to connect with them. It was great to be able to see their passion on something that wasn't just work related. And that's something I would really strongly encourage you to also be able to do, is look at what will bind them, look at what brings your teams together, and then be able to look at that. So moving on with this, we also look at, understanding the individual motivations of the team. What are they motivated by as a person? And then what can you do to be able to support them to achieve their goals? So I normally have a one-to-one with all of the new members on my team, but also kind of at appropriate moments with teams on a regular basis. And I like to ask them this very, very simple question. What can I do to make you a success? Not just in this project, but in the organization. And I like to be able to understand what their motivation is. Are they political? Are they career driven? Do they just want to be happy in their job at that moment? And being able to do this enables you to not only be able to see where their motivations are, but also where you can support them and potentially have quick wins as a manager to be able to get that. Now, working in a virtual environment has actually aided my ability to be able to do this. Because when I've been asking teams, what can I do to help you? What can I do to make sure that, you are a success in this project? I've been able to uncover issues like an inadequate working space. So I had one of my developers, this was in March, April, that did not have a desk or did not have two screens because they were only permitted one screen from the organization and they needed two screens to be able to work effectively. I managed to be able to get them a chair so that they weren't using a dining room chair, that they actually had a chair that supported their back. Being able to then support that helps me being able to let them work, but also it encourages and it tells them that I am invested in them. I want to be able to support them. And that all helps with building a meaningful connection and a meaningful relationship. Now, to be able to do this, I am proactive. I do reach out to my teams and I like to be able to say on an individual basis, I just want to learn. I want to be able to see what they're doing, see how things are going. And I want to be able to make sure that we do have that regular touch point. Because, I think one of the problems that you have when you work virtually is that days can just merge into one. And, is today Thursday? Is today Wednesday? What week is it? Are we really at the end of October? Those kind of things can really make a difference if you can just make sure that you do have that checkpoint, even if it's once a month or if it's once a quarter, just to be able to check in and make sure that they're okay. Now, I do like to make sure that I have, a regular check-in with my teams. I do it once every 2 weeks, but, that's just because of the nature of the project that we're in that requires it. Now, one of the things I have been very, very prominent on is investing in training. So I look at the investment in their skills. What do they need to be able to do to deliver this project or be able to support the project and the organization? Now, this has included, soft skills, as I was mentioning earlier, but it's also included, training for non-technical members. I have sent 2 of our project admins on Microsoft Teams training because they had never used it before March of this year. And they were getting a little bit overwhelmed and they were really struggling to be able to see how they, for example, search in Microsoft Teams. How do they add, team members to a team? What's the best way of being able to organize it? So for them, being able to then give them that investment and be able to talk with HR or their managers to be able to then give them that necessary skill set really helps. And then as a consequence, it helps me with my project because they know what to do, they know the tools we're using, and they know how we like to work. It's a win-win. Now, I would really strongly look at not only investing in training for yourself, but also for your teams. Ask them what they need. Especially if you're doing greenfield or new kind of technological projects, you need to make sure that everyone has the skills to be able to work. Now, whether that's learning on the job or whether that's learning in formal training, that's up to you and your organization to decide for what works best. Now, ultimately, one of the most important things is communication. Communication is critical. And do not underestimate how much time you are going to need to communicate. Look at, maybe innovative or different ways to communicate. And, look at what is the best way of communicating with your teams. Now, for me and for some of my groups, we have a WhatsApp group. So we have a WhatsApp group where it is purely and it is mandatory non-work related. So we share memes, we share funny pictures of our weekend. One of the developers is an absolutely fantastic baker. So the minute that the Great British Bake Off starts, he is there, he is following along. Now, normally, if we were in the office, we would be sharing and we'd be eating everything he makes. Unfortunately, because it's virtual, we just get the pictures of, what happened in bread week, how to make a good brownie or something like that. And, it's bringing that friendly communication and it's bringing that relationship and it's continuing to build it. But communication is also critical. You will be doing more of it. Now, when you are probably in a physical location or not working as virtual as you are now, maybe you took communication for granted. Maybe you took what you were doing and the fact that you could just go up to someone's desk or go and see them at the coffee machine, maybe you took that for granted. When you're working virtually, you can't do that. You need to make sure that you make an actual effort to be able to build and continue that communication with you and your teams to be able to make sure that you can continue working. Now, an element of this is also trust. You need to work on building trust within your teams. Now, this means not only, not going back on promises, but it's also about setting ground rules. Because if people understand how you want to work, what you expect from them, but also what they can expect from you, it all helps with building trust. So when I go into an initiative or when I start a project or I'm going in with new teams, I like to be able to give them, it's a 2 or 3 slides, and I like to say, this is what you can expect from me in this project. You can expect the following. You will expect honesty. I will, go to the ends of the earth and fight for you. I will invest in you. I will support you if you need that with clients or with the teams. But conversely, I expect some things from you. And we have that initial foundation of this is what our relationship can be built on. And then we do that. And then you do not go back on your promises. Now, that sounds a bit plain, doesn't it? Don't go back on your promises. But it's so easy to do. And it's especially easy to do if you are under pressure or if you are stressed. So that's why I like to really focus on making sure that when you're looking at managing your teams, look at them holistically. Look at them as individuals, but also how you can work together, not just on the short term, but for the longer term. Now, one of the things I also mentioned was around, managing teams and the work-life balance. So there has been, I think it was a massive rise over the summer with increased stress and the amount of people that were now, having a burnout or suffering from extreme stress and were having to go to a medical professional for it. Because working virtually can bring increased stress. You lose your commute, which in some ways is a good thing because then you're not stuck around the Brussels Ring Road or the Antwerp Ring Road trying to get to work or trying to get to the office or a client. What you can do is you can encourage your teams to switch off. You can do, for example, a virtual Friday drink, or you can have some sort of activity which kind of stops them. But I would try and look at your teams, look at what they are doing, and realize that you may have to kind of see what works best for them and if they are suffering from stress. Then what we're going to be doing, and this is something that I am passionate about, is making sure that you can take that moment. So I don't know about you, but a lot of the people that I have been working with and been talking to over the past few months, they maybe haven't taken their summer holidays as normally, or they haven't been able to have a full break. So normally within the Netherlands, at the minute that the school holidays begin, a lot of my developers instantly take 3 weeks off. And they take those 3 weeks and they go to the south of France in their caravan and they are switched off. You cannot get hold of them, you cannot contact them, and they come back and they are fully refreshed. They are regenerated. But what I've seen this year is in September and October, people are acting and behaving like they would if it was December. They are stressed, they are tired, they are fatigued. And what I have noticed is the people that maybe haven't taken their summer holidays or haven't taken it as they normally would are really, really struggling at the moment. So what this means is, they have, maybe they were working from home, or they had their 3 weeks or 2 weeks even, and they took it at home and they were still checking their emails every day. They didn't have that regeneration. They didn't have that time away to fully recharge their batteries. Now, what I've also seen and what we have now is we have the herfstvakantie, so the autumn holidays. We've had that just in the Netherlands, and I know that in Belgium it starts next week. How many of your teams and are you actually taking time off? Are you going to be able to turn off your PC and be able to focus on, if it's looking after your children, great. If it's going away with your partner, absolutely fantastic. Are you being able to fully recharge your batteries? Now, the problem that you have with this increased stress is, unfortunately, at the moment, and because we are in a pandemic, it leads naturally to an increased stress level. You are concerned about the health of your family. You are concerned if you've maybe had COVID yourself and are really struggling with the after effects. It is all completely normal. But then you have to take that moment, and we go back to being self-aware. Take that moment, take that break, and make sure that you try to regenerate and get a break and have a rest. Now, one of the things that I have been doing is I've also been investing in my teams, but I've also been checking in individually. Now, this isn't just kind of like a project checkup, like asking for an update. I'm asking them how they're doing. I want to make sure that they're not overworked or struggling. And if I see some red flags, so this could be emailing very, very early, very, very late. If I see them constantly online, especially if they have a day off, if I see them working over weekends, these are red flags to me, and this is something that I will address with them personally. Now, within my role as a project manager and as a leader, I will then communicate that with management. And it's something that I have been working with some of the resource managers, but also with some of the managers in my organization to make sure that if I do see people that I have concerns about, that they are already kind of taken care of. But we make sure that we have that, that support in place. If they do need, for example, training or advice or coaching on how to reduce their stress levels. Now, I'm very, very lucky with the teams that I work with that we do have a very open relationship. But if you're working with people from different cultures, or if you're working with teams that are physically located in another continent, for example, it can be difficult to be able to understand, what their stress really looks like, or whether they are being open and communicative with you. So it really takes that relationship building that I've just been talking about in the past few slides, getting to know your team, understanding them, what makes them tick, understand their motivations and their stresses, to then be able to see when they are stressed and when they are overworked. Because then you will be able to utilize your skills as a manager and as a leader to be able to manage them more effectively. So that's just one of the most important things that I can really recommend to you. Now, there are ways that you can check in individually without it seeming like you're just doing a box ticking exercise and you're just trying to do a project status update or something like that. Invite them for a coffee. If that's in your organization, if you've been doing agile coffee or you've been doing something like that, try and keep it up. Or what I've been doing is I've been scheduling a 15-minute walking break, or I've been doing that like a coffee break with some of my teams. And we just get outside and we just kind of have a 15-minute chat where we would normally be walking over lunch. So it's kind of nice to be able to kind of keep up the routine, but also be able to kind of catch up and see how they're getting on. Now, if people don't want to do that, or your teams are kind of resistant, that's okay. Lead by their example. See what other ways might work for your organization and your teams to be able to connect with them. And this is, there isn't going to be a one-size-fits-all solution. You need to know how your teams work, how your organization functions, to be able to then work out what's the best way of being able to do check-ins. What is the best way to be able to manage them? Do they like regular checkups? Do they prefer to have more of a, self-empowerment, or to have that ownership for themselves and they just want to report back on a status? Look at how your organization and your teams want to work, and then you can kind of follow on with that with these activities. And that's going to be important. So another one is around supporting your team's productivity. So as I mentioned, when I went into lockdown with my teams, I asked them, and we did this photo sharing exercise where I said, send me what your working, what your working desk looks like. Now, being developers, a lot of them had a fantastic setup. And I mean, there was a gaming chair, there was a great keyboard. It looked even better than the stuff we have in the office. But it was, for some people, that was great. But then I had other people in the organization and the people that I was working with in the team that were maybe kind of having a dining room table, or one of them was sitting on a bookcase. So they had, their laptop on a bookcase and they were standing for the entire day. One of the things I'm trying to encourage, and I encouraged in March and April, is looking at, are you sitting comfortably? So do they have the right chair to be able to work? Do they have the right tools to be able to be effective? Do they have a desk? Do they have a keyboard? Have a look at being able to invest in hardware. Now, there are some organizations that are now giving people and giving teams and their employees budgets. So you have, for example, 450 euros, and within that you could get a monitor, a good desk chair, keyboards, webcams, whatever. You have your 450 euros budget and you can spend it whatever you kind of want on office equipment and supplies, which is really, really good. But if you are finding that your teams are struggling because they don't necessarily have the right equipment, petition your HR, petition your managers to be able to make sure that they see the value in being able to give this to your teams. Now, one of the things that I also try and encourage is I try and foster an atmosphere of creativity and improvement. So imagine a protective bubble. I try and put that over my teams. I do that so I can encourage them to be able to work freely, to be able to work uninterrupted, to be able to look at being innovative, being able to see potential process improvements, and being able to, how can they work as a team, smarter? How can they be more efficient? And I try and create that protective bubble so that then they don't have people kind of interrupting them. They don't have product owners trying to come in and add in, new requirements. They don't have people from business trying to come in and get them to do quick bug fixes. I try and create that protective bubble. Now, when I'm working virtually, that's a lot harder because I can't, sit on the edge of a room and I can't stop people from being IM'd. But what I try and do, and I try and make sure that everyone is aware of, is that we keep working like we have. We look at the protective bubble and we try and see if, if, for example, one of my developers is being annoyed by business, that they'll tell me, and then I can address the problem directly. And I will say to the person from business, it is not appropriate for you to be contacting the developer directly for bug fixes. Please follow the approved process. And knowing that they are going to get stopped automatically kind of makes them think twice about whether or not they actually want to talk to the developer or, see the developer as itself. Another thing that we've been looking at is investing in new tools and softwares. So I try to encourage all of my team to think innovatively. Think about what we can do to not only work smarter, more efficiently, but what we can do to add value and make the most use out of their time. Because I'm going to guess that just like the people in your team, I have some incredibly intelligent and incredibly motivated individuals that just want to do good work. Given the opportunity, they can fly. So why, as a project manager, would I try and stifle that? I shouldn't. So why don't I try and build that? Why don't I try and see what I can do to be able to get them to that next level, to be able to deliver quicker, to be able to deliver faster? What we can do to be able to work more effectively. So I encourage them. I encourage them to look for those opportunities, whether that's pair programming for our juniors, whether that is being able to look at the different process improvements for how we do bug fixing. All of this can collaborate and encourage the teams to be able to work better. And of course, this does mean potentially investing in new tools or softwares, or encouraging, proof of concepts on, specific areas or specific new softwares just to see if it works. Being able to foster this atmosphere of creativity, it takes work, it takes energy. But the result, if you can get it working and you can get it in your teams, is like unlimitless. You can really have some great developments and some great processes in the process. Now, another thing that I would really strongly recommend is also doing team building. So just as a quick idea, and you can either put this in the chat or the Q&A, have you been doing team building since since lockdown or since March of this year? And if you have, that's great. But I'm gonna kind of guess that there's going to be quite a few of us and quite a few of you in the room that maybe haven't, or have maybe struggled with getting that team building and getting that interaction from your team. So one of the things that I have found works really, really well is online quizzes. So we normally do this in our Friday team building session, and our Friday kind of virtual drinks is we do some online quizzes. This could be trivia, this could be fun facts, it could be something like that. But it's something just to kind of keep people interested. It's a fun little thing to do when we're decompressing from the week. Another thing that we used to do a lot when we were on site is we used to do team lunches. So one of the developers would promote or identify a video that they found extremely useful or that would add value, and then we all used to watch it during our lunch break. We used to eat our lunches and we would learn about it, learn about something new. Whether that was, the new .NET Rocks episode that had just come out that was really, really insightful. So what we would do is we would then look at that and go, okay, what did we learn from that? Is there anything we can take from how we're currently working? And, kind of moving on from that, also appreciation. Now, I know a lot of you may not have a lot of budget, but it can be nice if you can kind of work with your teams and with your management on things like gift cards, or small tokens of appreciation. What I do in a couple of my teams, the ones that have kind of known each other for a couple of years, is we do Secret Santa. So, or rather Secret Sinterklaas. And we do this online, and we are actually doing it this year, where we each send, it has a €10 limit, and we can send things, to our colleagues, based upon the outcome. And we just send them a small gift. Now, €10 is something that even our juniors kind of stretch to, and it's just a nice way of being able to, make it fun. When we were physically in the office, we would have it over lunch, and we would be sharing, everything over lunch. And it would be a nice way of kind of seeing, what our colleagues might like, or, what they might find interesting. I think it was last year, and one of the guys got a 6-pack of Westflater beer. So the really, really, the best beer in the world, I've heard. And they got it, and because they knew they were a beer lover, and they got this 6-pack of Westflater. And another colleague got a handmade, a cozy for their mug, for their coffee mug. So it was kind of really nice to see how thoughtful the teams were, but it was just a great way of being able to manage and build, that bit of relationship that we had. Now, one of the things that I would like to recommend is also making sure that you keep your connections very human. So we do a lot of conversations, and you're probably going to be talking 90% about work. But why not try and spend a few moments, so 10 minutes, on some of the following? So these are examples that I have done in the past 2 months within my projects. So this is all dependent on the type of team you have, the amount of time that you have available, and also the engagement that you're working with. Some will be appropriate, some will not. So a show and tell. Show a picture of what you got up to at the weekend, whether that was biking in the Ardennes, whether that was going running on the trails in the Veluwe. Just show what you were doing. And then what you can do is you can also have trivia questions. So I've put opinion stage down here because that's one that I use. But we had a quick section on trivia in one of our Friday afternoon quizzes. Now, I'm going to guess most of you would already know about, is Java a type of OS, or the smallest unit of memory? But it might be fun to kind of see some of the guesses and some of the answers that could come out. When I have a new team, I like to be able to use icebreakers, and you can change the intensity of the questions. And I'm happy to share any of this after the presentation with the icebreakers to be able to see and get a discussion started. So, for example, you've been tasked with creating a real-life superhero. What would their superpower be? Or what was your favorite cartoon as a kid? If you had to create a new version of, a new flavor of ice cream, what would you create? And, it can be really helpful to kind of see just what the answers will be. And it helps you also learn about them as an individual. So also have a think about the way that you are keeping your interactions human. And it's not just about work. It's not just about the deliverable, but how you can also learn and build that relationship. So let's have a look at what we have to avoid. Now, it's going to be quite easy to also make a mistake. So everything that you do, and if you do make a mistake or when you make a mistake, learn from it. Learn what that mistake was and build on it. Build and become a more effective leader. Learn and make sure that you don't upset or annoy your teams, unprovokedly. So one of the things that I find is probably the most common mistake that leaders make, and especially if they've gone from leading in a physical to a virtual atmosphere, is they just keep doing what they were doing. They were keeping doing whatever they used to do because that's what worked. I led teams physically, so that must work virtually. No, that's not the case at all. So it could also be useful to make sure that you don't do anything. You have to change how you lead. You have to change how you work. That's just the nature of the beast that we are working in. That doesn't mean that you need to become someone different. That just means that you just have to adjust your management style and leadership style just a little bit different. Now, another thing that I would encourage you not to do not treat everyone the same. A developer in Belgium and a developer in the Netherlands could be very, very similar, but they could also be extremely different. Just like the people that you'd be working with, for example, in India or a colleague in the US. There is a considerable difference between these different colleagues and what you can do to make yourself as aware as possible. Now, what you can do to be able to understand this is you can do something like Myers-Briggs or the Gallup Strength Finder or See Me on some of the different performances, and you can really see how people like to work, but also where their strengths and weaknesses are. And that can also help with distance bias. Whether they like hierarchy, whether they prefer to have a formal structure, or do they prefer a flat layer and they want to be direct? So this is also taken into consideration the cultural background of the people that you're working with. So if I'm working with developers in the Netherlands, for example, I fully understand that they want to be given the task, they want to be given the ownership of it, and that I should expect my update from them. But other than that, I can leave them to work. And I know that when I'm working with my Indian colleagues, I know that they prefer to have a more consistent follow-up and feedback. They prefer to be able to have that daily follow-up. They prefer to be able to show their workings. And that's fine. But if I start treating my developers in the Netherlands like I treat my Indian colleagues, then I get quite annoyed developers very, very quickly. Just like if I try and treat my Indian colleagues like I treat my Dutch developers, then I radically get a lot of bad work or a lot of inconsistent work because they haven't had that feedback, and then they become increasingly demotivated because they don't feel like I care. Whereas the opposite is true. So you also need to make sure that you do take into consideration where they are from. And this also comes into consideration if you have Indian colleagues that are now seconded into the Netherlands or Belgium. You have to be aware of how they like to work. Now, one of the things that I often see is because people are working virtually, they must need a meeting. You need to have a meeting to be productive. So therefore, I will schedule meetings in your calendar from 8, 9, 10, 11, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That must mean that you're productive. No, nothing could be further than from the truth. So what I would encourage you to do is allow your teams to be creative. Give them that time to be able to work. This goes back to one of the tips that I said earlier. Try and cut your meetings down by 50%. Try and give your team the flexibility to be able to work. Now, I'm not saying give them free rein. I am not saying, do absolutely nothing. I'm saying be productive, be smart with how you're scheduling your meetings, and see the best way of working. And again, don't do the too many meetings. Just because you can't see them doesn't mean they're not working. I used to have an old manager of mine, and he was in his late 50s, and he thought that if you worked from home, you were just binging on Netflix all day and you were not working. That's not going to be very true, is it? Most of the people that I know that work from home are the hardest workers in the entire workforce. And I have seen that in the coming, in the previous couple of months, that people, they aren't sitting down watching Netflix all day. They might watch Netflix over lunch, but they are not being productive. They're not being non-productive. They are working extremely hard. And if they need that hour break to go and watch Netflix or to go and run an errand or to go for a jog, absolutely fine. Give them that time. Micromanaging is one of the worst ways to be able to motivate your colleagues, because it's going to completely demotivate them. It's going to be the easiest way to cause conflict in your teams. And it's also going to be the easiest way to annoy the people that you are trying to work with. So avoid it. If you see yourself as a micromanager, look at what you can do to change your behavior. Now, I have written a blog about this quite recently, so if you go to my blog, you can kind of see some ways that you can improve. But if you do find yourself running into these issues, please address them, because the biggest thing that you can have at the moment is damaging your reputation, damaging your relationships that you're building within your teams, or damaging the teams functioning themselves. So please don't do that. Please change how you like to work. Now, another thing to take into consideration is forcing traditional working hours. Don't force people to work 9 to 5 if they work better or there's a more efficient way of working. Make sure that you don't force people to go into the workplace, especially if it is unsafe, especially with the rising and the lockdown and the COVID that we have at the moment. The levels that are coming on a daily basis mean it's now no longer safe to go into these places. So don't force your teams to. And also, if your teams offer to work in a different way or offer improvements, don't just rubbish them. Don't just say, nope, it's not going to happen. We use Microsoft Teams because Microsoft Teams is good. I don't want to use Discord. I don't like it. It's a new tool. Don't do it. Be open to the improvements that your teams are bringing you. Be open to what you are able to actually achieve. Trust in them. Trust in yourself and trust in your teams. Now, again, no trash talking. Please, please, please don't be bitchy and don't be, talking disrespectful to either your teams, your colleagues, or your team members. It's not appropriate. And especially where, for example, written words can be used in HR grievances, it's not the most smartest thing to be able to do. It's not going to help your relationship. It's not going to help your reputation within your teams, but also as a manager. So just don't do it. If you need to trash talk to your husband or your wife. Trash talk to a tree, but do not trash talk to a physical person that you are working with. Now, we have a few minutes left. I think we've got a couple of minutes for a question if there are any. But, summary, you have to adapt or die. You can't work as you have always worked, so please don't try. Adapt, become a good virtual leader. Utilize the tools that you have available to you and trust yourself within the boundaries that you are finding yourself in. If you have any questions at the end of this session that we don't get to, or you have anything that you'd like to discuss, please don't hesitate to reach out to me on my email, LinkedIn, Twitter. I would be more than happy to answer any questions or be able to support you if you are struggling as a virtual leader. So, do we have any questions?
Yes, Emily, thank you for the presentation. There's one question in the Q&A tab from Danny.
Okay. Let me just see if I can stop sharing for a second. Okay, so from Danny.
The last one.
The last one. Okay. So why turn off the computer? I live alone, and with this pandemic, computing and virtual meetings are my sweet escape. Is that still allowed? Definitely. Please. I think one of the biggest problems that we have at the moment is isolation. And if you are finding yourself isolated, just make sure that you turn off your work PC. You can still connect with all of your friends on Facebook, on Instagram. Keep that going. Keep that environment working for you. But just make sure that you kind of have that clear switch between professional and private. You can still use your, still use your personal laptop. Keep using your social media, because that is the most important thing, to be able to make sure that you do have, that escape that you mentioned. That's all completely allowed. And thank you very much for your question, Denny.
Okay, I don't see any extra questions, so maybe we can end here right on time.
Perfect.
Thank you very much for the presentation, Emily. It was interesting to hear some tips and tricks to work virtually. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. Have a good day, everyone. Enjoy the rest of the conference.
All right, thank you.